Hi, hello Kayvon. This is my last response to your videos, your set of videos. What I'd like to do is respond to this video and then review the topics that we've talked about. There's not going to be anything new in the review. It's just going to be a look back on some topics that we've touched on. Your latest response is basically, or your last point, I should say, is that the reason why homosexuals are marginalized, the marginalization that I speak of, is a result of lack of education in the Bahai community. It's a result of Baha'is bringing their prejudices from their own experiences into the Bahai community and not something that's part of the scripture or the religion. However, if your attitude, as demonstrated in these videos, represents the correct Baha'i attitude towards homosexuality, which presumably it does, then you are confirming that intolerance of homosexuality, the act, is endemic to the Baha'i faith. It's not just an accidental thing that's brought in to the community. Because it's precisely people of your persuasion that marginalize and isolate homosexuals in the Baha'i community. Why so? Because with your attitude, which is that homosexuality is largely a psychological disorder, that it's against nature, and that homosexuality should be suppressed, the act should be suppressed, this attitude creates suspicion of homosexuals in the Baha'i community, and it also contains within it an implicit condemnation of homosexuality, the tendency, which you say the Baha'i faith has no problem with. You can't legitimately separate the tendency from the sexual act, as I said before. So the problem is not a lack of education or learning more, the Baha'i community needing to learn more about the Baha'i faith. The problem is the Baha'i faith. Now, what I'd like to do is review some of the points that we've gone over in our discussion. One of the first things that, the whole point of our discussion is about whether the Baha'i faith is intolerant of homosexuality. And if there's nothing immoral about homosexuality, the act, then the Baha'i faith is surely intolerant of it. You said that the homosexual act is immoral because it can't produce life. It doesn't have the potential for producing life. However, I pointed out that this argument's invalid since the Universal House of Justice admits that the production of children isn't the only purpose of marriage. Another reason why it's invalid is that so long as a couple can have children, somehow, anyhow, it should not matter whether there is a sexual act connected with that conception or production of children. Consider, for example, foreplay in a heterosexual relationship. Foreplay doesn't create children, but it creates good feelings and creates a stronger relationship, and also gets the night ready, if you will, for the sexual act, which itself produces children. So is foreplay immoral because it doesn't lead directly to having children? The third reason why homosexuality is not immoral with this whole cannot produce life thing is because surrogate parents, homosexuals can use surrogate parents, which is not immoral. There's nothing wrong with surrogate parents. And the fourth reason why the homosexual act is not immoral is that homosexuals can adopt kids. The sexual act doesn't have to be connected with the adopting of kids. And suppose, if you really, really want the sexual act to be connected with the adopting of the kids, suppose that the sexual act motivates a couple to adopt. Then what? The second point that you raise is that the homosexual act is immoral, supposedly, because it's not natural, or, if you like, it's against nature. However, there's three problems with this. First is there's a confusion of the meaning of natural, because the sense in which you mean natural is a normative sense of natural, which is that everywhere I look, what you're saying is everywhere I look, I see that people seem to have heterosexual tendencies, and the homosexual tendency just seems kind of weird and not normal to me. And so, just like you wouldn't use your hand to fly You don't use your body parts for what they're not intended for. But this is, like I said, this is a confusion of the idea of nature or natural with a normative sense of what's normal, or a moral sense of what's normal. My second objection is that the APA does confirm that it's natural, and my third objection is that it doesn't matter whether it's natural or not. To say that homosexuality is wrong because it's not natural, is to commit what G.E. Moore, the philosopher G.E. Moore, calls the naturalistic fallacy, which is that whether something is natural or not is irrelevant to whether it's moral or not. Your third point is that Baha'i theology emphasizes spiritual growth over material pleasure. However, there's three problems with this point. First of all, it's irrelevant, since this applies equally for and against the heterosexual act, which you think is legitimate within the context of marriage. Secondly, it does not single the homosexual act out as particularly immoral. Thirdly, it's irrelevant because it's an objection, at best, to immoderation of the sexual impulse, or sex outside of marriage. It's an argument against immoderation or sex outside of marriage. It has absolutely nothing to do with homosexuality per se. Your last point was that the Baha'i laws are only for Baha'is, and I really, really hope that you're not going to raise this again, but if you do, please note that it's not true that the Baha'i laws are imperative for all of humanity, and if it is true, then the Baha'i faith is arbitrary. So that's a review of the 4 points that you've raised, which is that the homosexual act is supposed to be immoral because it can't produce life, because it's not natural, because the Baha'i theology emphasizes spiritual growth, and the Baha'i faith is intolerant because the Baha'i laws are only for Baha'is.